Thank you. Oh, wow, I'm really loud. The video wasn't quite that loud. It says limit my remarks to 2 minutes. I'd go ahead and tuck in for about 25 if I were y'all. So if I'm standing weird and acting weird, I am wearing this necklace from Chopard and this watch. And I've never had jewelry on like this in my life. So thank you, Chopard team. I got a security guard and everything. So this is basically the best 2 hours of my life. So I'm just going to cherish it for a little bit. And I get to drive some pretty badass cars, but this is awesome. So you made my story sound so perfect, so I really appreciate that, Laura. But I'm going to tell the real version of it, and you'll see that it maybe wasn't quite as seamless as it sounded. And I'm really happy to be here and truly honored to be obviously representing Aston Martin. I live in San Clemente, and to be part of this community. So here we go, get ready. You're gonna hear about how a girl from Louisville, Kentucky didn't only become the first female president of Aston Martin, I'm one of 2 women in the entire automobile industry to ever have this title. And let's hope my daughter never has to say she's ever one of 2 of anything. So you'll see a really interesting picture here on the screen if you all can see it. And I won't make you name that car in the upper left-hand corner, but that is a 1990 Nissan Sentra. And that was my first car ever, which I thought was pretty cool. And well, it kind of was. I had wheels, right? And the other car is the car that I drove here in today, which is a, yeah, okay, it's not as expensive as a necklace, but it's still really cool. And that is a DBS Superleggera, which is 715 horsepower and 664 pound-foot of torque. So there's been a nice progression for me from a car and a jewelry standpoint today, too. So okay, I'm going to talk about me. So here we go. So this is a picture of my family. I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, and I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. So the y'alls are, I'm from the South. You're like, which one is she? I'm the one with the really dark hair in the middle. So to anyone who's a hairstylist, thank you for all these highlights. Much appreciated, because I like it better now. But clearly, I think bangs are still in. So this is a picture of my family. And I grew up in a very traditional family in Louisville, Kentucky. Very loving parents. Very, very fortunate, but I wasn't really a normal kid, as my mom has told me. And when she tells me the stories, I'm like, oh my God, I was a nightmare. I hope my daughter doesn't turn out like this. But I was sort of the kid that if I'm losing the Scrabble game, I like accidentally tip the board over. If you have a kid that does that, you really need to watch out. In the South, there's this thing, y'all don't have cotillion out here, do you? Where you like learn, you do have this, like where you like learn how to ballroom dance, which is a very useful skill to have for me these days. But at a young age, I was learning how to ballroom dance and meet grown-ups and all those sorts of things. And they did this like musical chairs thing where like you'd sit and then the boy would stand behind you. I was like a terror, and I was taking the other little girls out so I could make sure I won the M&Ms and I could take my white gloves off and sit in the corner and eat my M&Ms. And in fact, one time my parents were chaperoning, and all the other parents were like, oh my God, who is this like terror of a child? And they're like, she's with us. So I think my mom and dad decided that maybe cotillion wasn't going to be my only course of action, and they needed to find somewhere to help me channel my competitive instincts, and I ended up playing tennis. So I abandoned everything else and started playing tennis at the age of 10. And I think tennis is really where okay, also more upsetting pictures. I was in like really good shape. But I was like, don't check out my arms on the next 2 pictures. I like, went to the gym a lot as a 16-year-old. So anyway, I started playing tennis, and it really became a way for me to channel that competitive spirit. Again, I was this kid, if I didn't get a perfect score on a test, I would literally rip the paper up. I mean, my parents, I think, were concerned a little bit. So tennis let me challenge, really channel that competitiveness. When I got to high school, I was woefully unpopular. Dry sarcasm seemingly didn't translate that well in the 90s to an all-girls Catholic school. But as I spent my lunches eating by myself, I dreamed of being a tennis player, and that's really where I spent my time. I ultimately won the state tennis championship 2 years in a row. This is the really upsetting picture. And I knew I was going to go to college on a tennis scholarship. I mean, that was clear. I was doing really well with tennis. And I had narrowed it down to about 5 schools. My criteria was top 20 in tennis, top 20 in academics. And growing up Catholic, my parents really, really wanted me to go to Notre Dame. So obviously that was not where I was going to go. It was like, no one does what their parents say. But I went on a recruiting trip to Notre Dame. And they're very smart there. They bring you in on a football weekend, which is pretty remarkable. And I fell in love with Notre Dame, and I went to Notre Dame on a full tennis scholarship. So college is an interesting period in my life because I finally wasn't quite as unpopular, and playing Division I sports is, pretty cool. But I had no thoughts about what I wanted to do, and I always marveled at other kids who seemingly are like, I'm going to go into business, or I'm going to do this. I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'll be a doctor like my dad. So I started taking the classes to go pre-med. I was like, I don't think so. This is very hard. And I started trying to figure out what I would do. And I came up with the double major of government and Spanish. So no knock on Notre Dame. I love my alma mater, but I know very little about the government, and I can't speak Spanish fluently. So I'm not actually sure how I graduated with that double major, but seemingly it worked out. But there is something weird with our system. When you're 19 years old, you pick a major, and all of a sudden this is what's going to dictate your career path. And I had never even thought about who I wanted to be from a career standpoint. So I graduated, I'm captain of the team. And like anyone, I realized I was like, well, I'm not going to go on the pro tour. What am I going to do? Government and Spanish. I'm going to go to law school. So I take the LSAT, and I decided I would go back to Kentucky, which felt like a safe place to go for law school. I spent the summer traveling Europe, and I get to Kentucky for law school. Okay, any of y'all that are lawyers, if you've been to law school, there's actually an assignment before your first day. Yeah, I didn't know any of this. I'm in my head, this whole law thing is I'm going to be like Elle Woods in Legally Blonde, and she looked awesome going to law school. So it is not at all like that. I'm just gonna, if you're considering a change in career and you're gonna go to law school, just come have a conversation with me. We need lawyers, but it was a really tough 3 years. And after my first semester, I was like, I kind of came crashing down, to be quite frank. And I talk a lot to people about my mid-20s. I went from being a captain of the tennis team at a wonderful university to being a mediocre law student. So I said to my dad, I was like, I think I'm gonna quit law school. It's not for me. The people are really mean. It's really hard. I don't even know if I wanna be a lawyer. He's like, just stick with it. And I think he knew I'd never quit anything in my life. So I finished the first year, and I make it through all 3 years. And I start practicing law. So again, not sure why this was my decision. I started practicing contract law. And I found myself one day agonizing over whether we should utilize a semicolon or a colon. And I was like, these are tough decisions, people. I don't know. I don't even know if I can make this decision. And I thought, maybe this isn't the career for me. So it is quite upsetting. So I decided that I wanted to maybe move, and I'm like, maybe staying in Kentucky. I hadn't made great choices in those years of law school. I hadn't picked a perfect person to spend my time with. I didn't love being in school, and I'm like, I think I need to get out of Kentucky. And where else would any good Kentucky girl go when she doesn't know where to go? I decided to come to California. Now, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna be a lawyer. I had some friends living in the San Diego area, and I said, look, is there any way I can use your all's address on my resume? And my resume basically said I had done nothing other than play tennis and go to school. I was like, but I'm gonna get a job in California. You can imagine my parents' dismay as well. Like, what? Like, all of this schooling and you're gonna go to California. So I started applying for jobs in San Diego, turned down for every single one that I applied for. It's also interesting because you start applying for jobs and people say to you, well, you don't have any experience. It's like, yeah, no shit, I'm trying to get some experience, people. Like, I know I don't. So I have a huge amount of empathy, and I love to hire people that come to Aston Martin that maybe don't have experience, because I remember exactly what that felt like. As I was getting ready to move back to Kentucky, I was told I sounded too Southern back then. I had a very thick Kentucky accent. No one would believe I had gone to law school. I happened to walk in the door, so I see this ad, and it said something to the effect of, looking for, I think it was on Monster.com, if Monster existed in the late 90s, and it was like, energetic. I was like, boom, got that. Hardworking, I can handle that one. And it was like something about internet. I was like, 2 out of 3, not so bad, I'll apply. So I apply for this job. I have no idea what the company did. Like, I literally did not know their business proposition whatsoever. And I walk in the door, and this is like, I'm ready to basically hang it all up. I'm gonna end up going back to Kentucky and being a contract attorney. And they said, well, what do you know about the internet? And I was like, look, I don't know anything about the internet. And, well, what do you know about cars? I'm like, cars? I got a Nissan Sentra. I know a lot about cars. And they're like, well, we're this startup company. We sell cars online. And as I left to go to the door, the HR manager is like, we want to offer you a job. And I was like, you are kidding me? I am going to get a job? And they were like, we would like to offer you $20,000 and like 100 shares of stock. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I am so taking that. That is not very much money, people, in Southern California in the late 90s. But I take the job. And that is where my career in automotive actually started. Now, I thought I was going to be a multimillionaire at around age 26 because this whole thing, we were going to go public, and my 100 shares of stock were going to, really come to fruition. I was making not enough money really to feed myself, so I worked 2 extra jobs. I was working 3 jobs. My favorite extra job, have you all ever done the game where you ask your friends, like, what's the weirdest job you ever had? If you haven't done it, it's so fun because you can't believe what people have done. My job was, Tony Robbins, like the motivational speaker, they needed people in the evenings to come and like write responses to fan mail. Like, these people would be like, oh my God, Tony Robbins, you have changed my life. And I was like, well, thank you. I'm glad you attended my seminar. That was my job. I was like, Tony Robbins is going to come after me at some point. I'm hoping. I'm going to meet this man again. Well, they gave me a script, and I was like, oh, we can do better than that. I mean, I did have a law degree, so I sort of did know how to write. So that was one of my stranger jobs, but worked 3 jobs, ate beans and rice the last week of every single month. But still, I've got employment. I can't believe this. And a very good friend of mine who actually lives here in Orange County, his name is Dean Evans, and he's the chief marketing officer for Hyundai. He and I worked together, and he'd gotten a job at Land Rover. And he's like, look, Laura, I got to tell you what. I know you think you're going to be a multimillionaire. It's not going to happen, but I think I can get you a job as a contractor at Land Rover. They need to build a website. There's all sorts of things, and I think you could do it. And so I go for my interview. I get the job. I used my law degree once. I wrote my contract for employment at Land Rover. I know. It was a pretty well-written contract. I focused a lot on reimbursement of food. I did. I don't know why. I was like, I think because I ate beans and rice like the last week of every month. I was like, oh, these people are going to feed me. So anyway, so I start my career at Land Rover, and you told the story, the part of the story that you missed out a little bit. So I was in charge of getting this group of people together, and I know for all of us right now, it's impossible to imagine that like websites didn't exist, but this is literally like late 90s, like year 2000, and we're building this website, and I get this project team together. And it's my first day at work, and I had been working at a startup. We wore like jeans and t-shirts every day, so I was like, okay, I need to look really professional. What are you gonna wear if you're gonna look professional? A cardigan sweater, obviously, and a pearl necklace, like every good Southern girl would wear. This is the only day I'm not wearing a pearl necklace because of this action. So anyway, I have this meeting, and the guy did say to me, what could you possibly know about any of this? You look like you're 12, which I was asked if I was a high school intern. I mean, now I would probably take these all as compliments, but when you're really trying to prove yourself at a business, it's not a compliment. So I was really upset, and I got in my car, and I was like, maybe I'm not cut out for this. And I went straight to Taco Bell, and I had 2 Nacho Bel Grande, which sounds, I don't know, I feel like they're smaller now, and I could easily knock back 2 on any given moment in time. But at the time, it seemed like an excessive amount of food. And I went back to the office, and I was like, you need to work with me because we need to deliver this project. And I think it was one of the first times I realized I could start finding ways to assert myself in work. So when I started this role at Land Rover, I ultimately got hired as a full-time employee. I was told, we're not sure this internet thing's gonna take off. You need to go learn the car business. So I spent a lot of time learning the car business, and it took me through every sort of sales job, every operations job. The hard thing was, as I looked to every corner office to figure out, well, what am I supposed to wear? Maybe cardigan sweaters, like no one else is wearing a cardigan sweater except for me. Like, what am I supposed to look like? Every time I looked in one of those offices, it was all sort of middle-aged white men. And I'm like, well, no one really looks like me. No one really talks like me. And I found it very hard to figure out what my place looked like. I would go to a conference room, and all the seats would be at the board, because I was the only person who knew about the internet, basically. So they actually had to have me in some of these meetings. Because no one knew. And I would take the first seat in the back of the room, always. I'm like, I don't think I should sit at the table because it's all men. And that's, really the nature of the car business a little bit. And it wasn't easy, all of those years and the jobs that I had. I was told to make sure that I wore a pantsuit to a meeting. So I wore a dress. I was told to cut my hair, so I've grown it as long as it'll grow at age 45. So, but I think it was hard. But I had some wonderful mentors, and in particular, a woman that started looking out for me. That was one of our dealers, and she let me work in her dealership and really learn the car business. And as I learned the business, my confidence grew. I got turned down from a job once as a general manager. They gave it to this guy. And then he took a job in Detroit. And I went to the hiring vice president, and I said, you're really in a bad position right now. This is like in 2008 or 9, like literally the market is starting to crash. I said, you're in a really bad position, and you need someone to do this job. I was like, give me the job and give me the title. And if I don't do it in 90 days, fire me, which didn't happen. And I ultimately got that job, and then I got promoted to be director. So I packed my stuff up. I'd been living in New York at the time. I packed my stuff up, and I moved to England. And I remember when I landed at Heathrow, I had this terrible, sinking feeling. Like, I was doing pretty well in the United States. Like, what am I doing? So I did what I think I have an eating problem. Like, what I normally do, anyone who's been to Heathrow, there's McDonald's literally, right next to Heathrow Airport. So if you've had a bad flight and you need a snack, there's a McDonald's there. I go through the drive-through. I'm learning how to drive on the other side of the road. I'm like, British people love Americans. Okay, they don't all love us. I'll just throw that out there too. And I found really that first few months in England to be really tough. I was one of 9 female directors, probably 100 directors. I think there was maybe 8 or 9 women. And again, I had all of this uncertainty about, how do I sound? What do I know? Where do I sit? There's no other women. And I really needed mentors, which is something I'm going to talk about in a little bit because it became very important to me. There I am in front of a very cool Defender. But there was a bit of a turning point. So I'm going to talk about these individuals here for a second and talk about my personal life. So I've told you a lot about me so far and my story, but I haven't talked about if I ever dated anyone. I always thought, I was like, guys love me. Sports, I like cars, and I hate to communicate. Like, what is better than that? Like, don't text me. I don't actually want to talk to you that much. So I always found myself to be, like, I always had guys in my life, but I'd been so focused on my career, like, head down, I need to take care of me. This is, I need to prove everyone wrong that told me I wasn't going to make it. So moved to England, sort of struggling a little bit personally, very focused professionally. I found it very hard, though. And the goofy guy leaning in is one of my best friends, Frank. He's the only person I knew when I moved to England. And he's like, you are so boring. I was like, I'm not boring. He's like, look, I've met some friends. Why don't you, come out and meet us? This was the night of William and Kate's wedding, actually. I remember it very vividly. And I was like, I hate your friends. Drink too much beer and, talk about chicks. I'm not into it. Anyway, I walk into this pub, which is where you meet everyone. And that is where I met the guy in the middle, and his name is Nick. And Nick proceeded to ask me out for 5 months. And I said no every time because I'm like, I do not have time for this. I'm working in the car industry. I need to prove myself as a woman in this business, and I don't have time to date anyone. I'm like, I work till 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock every night. I'm in the office. I don't have time to date. Anyway, on the 4th of July, Nick brings me a home-baked apple pie, and I was like, holy shit, I have to go out with this guy. Like, who puts that much effort in? So I go out with Nick, and my mom and dad come to visit. My mom meets Nick, and she's like, we have hated everyone you've ever dated. This guy actually seems quite good. So Nick and I fall in love. And I'm going to talk a little bit why falling in love with Nick was very important, because as I was falling in love with Nick, I actually was starting to change my own behaviors with my team. And I wish someone had alerted me to this at some other point in my career. All of a sudden, I actually wanted to leave the office because I wanted to go see this guy. All the people working for me were like, thank God she's leaving. We can leave now. And I'm like, you could have always left. So anyone who's a manager and you think staying there really late and sending your team messages at midnight and over the weekend, do not do it. This is not good for people showing up feeling very motivated on Mondays. But because of Nick, it actually allowed me to become a different type of manager. And I never wanted to be defined as someone's wife or that I needed anyone. But actually, I learned so much because of him. So we got married. We have the same anniversary as my mom and dad, November the 25th. And things are going really, really well for us. I've met basically every member. Yeah, that's Prince Charles. So I know, I'll tell you the story. So I've met every member of the royal family, I haven't met Meghan, but because she came along after I left, but except for the Queen. And the funny story about this is, so Prince Charles is coming in, and we're doing this event with Land Rover, and we're partnered with one of his charities. So PR people literally start to shit themselves when someone like me is going to meet the royal family. Like, oh God. Okay, so you have to go through all this training, right? You got to curtsy, and they're like, you need to know how to curtsy. I'm like, I took cotillion, people. I've got this. But so anyway, the helicopter lands. Prince Charles gets out. I do my curtsy. I'm Laura Schwab. I'm the head of marketing for Jaguar Land Rover. He's like, wait, like who? What? I was like, head of marketing, Jaguar Land Rover. And he's like, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Royal Leamington Spa. Well, he starts laughing because I'm saying Jaguar wrong because, of course, they say Jaguar. And so he's kind of laughing at me. Well, this graced, the Sunday Telegraph. This picture was in it. I sent it to my parents in Louisville, Kentucky. They're like, oh, my God, what did you say? Cracked some stupid joke. And I was like, Mom, I promise, everything's okay between the UK and the US. It's fine. So, anyway, things are going well at Jaguar and Land Rover. I really sort of hit my stride there. I became really confident. I really figured out how to say no, to stand up for the things I believed in. Wasn't looking for a new job. Wasn't remotely interested in leaving Jaguar Land Rover, but got approached by a friend of mine who's chief marketing officer globally for Aston Martin. He contacts me and he's like, Laura, any desire to, come do an Aston Martin factory tour. And I was like, who's going to turn that down, right? I was like, I would love to do an Aston Martin factory tour. So that morning, again, I think about the things I focused on. I'm like, what was wrong with me? I was going to a cricket match that day. Has anyone ever been to cricket? Okay. Oh, you have? Right. Okay. Well, I'm like, what do you wear to cricket? Like, I was not focused on the factory tour. I was like, what do people wear to cricket? They must wear all white. I will wear all white. No. Only the people who play wear all white. Like, the people in the stands do not. So it goes cricket match. I'm knocking back champagne. I was like, oh, got to go to my factory tour. So I get up to the factory tour. Meet up with my friend Simon Spruill, and he's like, so excited to see you. We had worked together here in Orange County at the PAG building, which is now Taco Bell building. And he's like, I can't believe after all these years we live in the middle of England together, in the same place. So I go to take this factory tour, and I didn't know that much about Aston Martin, and the doors open to the factory, and it's deadly silent. And I'm like, oh, they must be taking a break. And Simon's like, nope. That's the beauty of it. Come in here. And he proceeds to tell me about how the cars are made. You start picking up noises, and if you ever have a chance to go to England and you want to do something and spend a day, you have to do this. It's so remarkable. All you can start hearing is the sound of sewing machines, because every Aston Martin, it takes 300 hours to make every car. So in our 106-year history, we've made as many cars as Toyota makes in 1 week, to tell you how special and bespoke these vehicles are. We go over to the seamstresses who are stitching it. So normally when a car goes into, if you've been to a factory, they sort of go down a factory line. One person does the right side, one person does the left side. You can't do that if it's handmade, because every human being has a unique stitch. So only one person can stitch the inside of a car. And we actually have people on our team that can look at the stitching of our cars and be like, oh, the person was left-handed or right-handed just based on how it's stitched. So Simon starts taking me through all of this and the 50 hours of paint. And if you have a chance to go look at the car out there, look at the badge. The badge is actually a piece of jewelry. Chapard people, you're going to want to go check this out. It's made in the Jewelry District in Birmingham, England. Anyway, Simon starts telling me all this. We're going through the factory, and he's like, oh, well, look here. Here's our global CEO, Andy Palmer. And I am like, Andy, great job. I can't believe this. This is amazing what you all are doing here. And he's like, wow, we've got a big plan for Aston Martin. We're getting ready to launch 7 new cars in 7 years. I'm like, that's awesome. I really wish you good luck with that. And, I have no idea. And he's like, we'd like you to be part of it. And I was like, holy shit, this is a job interview? And then I'm like, wait, did I just curse? Like, everything's gone wrong. I'm wearing all white. I'm on a factory tour. I drank too much champagne. Anyway, the last 10 hours, I'm sort of like replaying. And I was like, well, what's the job? And they're like, well, we want you to be president and CEO of Aston Martin the Americas. And I'm like, oh, wow. And he said, we're going to launch these cars, and we want you to be part of it. I'll rattle off what the cars are really fast, just so everyone knows, for all the car people. It started with DB11, a V12, a V8, a Volante, which is a convertible, the new Vantage, the DBS Superleggera that I wrote in here on today. We're revealing an SUV at the end of this year, a mid-engine, which is going to basically kick Ferrari's butt, and then 2 Lagondas, which will be all electric. So he rattles these cars off, and I'm like, and you want me to be president? So I go home, and I sit down with Nick, and I'm like, Nick, he goes, oh, how was the factory tour? Tell me about it. So I go through the whole thing, and I was like, they want me to be president. And my husband looks at me, and he goes, oh, my God, that is the coolest fucking job in the world. And I was like, it basically is, yes. So I was like, well, what are we going to do? And when you have these moments in your life where everyone's like, well, now we have to go have the talk. Let's go have the talk. Remember, I'm bad at the talk. I don't like the talk. This is when you've picked the right partner. And I always talk to people about surrounding themselves with the right people, because they become very important in the decisions that you make in life. We didn't go have the talk. In fact, we didn't talk at all. And I said, well, what do you think we're going to do? And he's like, sounds like we're moving to America. Didn't blink, no talk. So the plan is, I'm going to move to America, come to California. Nick's going to stay in England, and he's going to get his visa so he can get a job here, and was hoping to transfer with his company. So I move here, it's like, okay, I've got some work to do. We're going to launch all these cars. I got to figure out what this team is. And Anyway, we were really happy. This is our dog, Belle. And Nick and I had decided that we didn't want to have children. I had never had time for children. It wasn't something that I was interested in, not because I love kids. I have like 8 godchildren. But we were like, we're on this sort of path. And anyway, Nick comes to see me. So I'm like 5 weeks here. And it's our anniversary. And we're like really happy to see one another. And I got pregnant, so so you know, these things. I mean, I know how it happens. Like, I ran out of birth control. I didn't have a doctor here yet, you know. And I'm like, I'm 42 years old. What are the chances? Apparently, very high. So, so I get pregnant, and I guess, you know, it's supposed to be this really exciting moment in your life for those of you that have children. I'm sure you remember the minute that you found out you're pregnant and you're like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. I had a total sense of dread and guilt. And my initial thought was not like, oh, God, this is a miracle. This is God's plan. My original thought was, they're going to be upset that they hired a woman. And then I started feeling guilty about that. You know, any man would want to be president and CEO of Aston Martin. Any human being on the planet would want that job. They hired a woman. They'd never hired a woman. Only Mary Barra is the other female CEO and president, and here I am pregnant. And then I felt guilt because I thought, oh my God, all of these women that had worked for me, and they had to come tell me they were pregnant, did I make them feel badly? And I went through a really difficult period. I lived here. I only saw Nick twice during my pregnancy. And anyone who's pregnant, period, but at 42, Marcy, you know what my feet looked like. They were not good. It was not a beautiful pregnancy. And, you know, we weren't sure Nick was going to get here in time, but he showed up 5 days before my daughter, Marie, who's named after my mother, was born. There she is going to Notre Dame, her first Notre Dame game. So what's happening? Oh, yeah, and she has an Aston Martin. I know, I'm in so much trouble. You know, I took 3 months off, and I came back to work. And I remember that moment where I handed Marie over to our nanny, and I broke down in tears. And I looked at my husband, and I said, she's going to raise our daughter. And he's like, no, she's not. We're going to raise her. So we have a mini village of people helping us raise Marie. Since I joined Aston Martin, balancing Nick, I now 2-year-old that's being potty trained, a team that is expanding. When I got there, we had less than 5% women. Half of my leadership team is now women, which I'm very proud of. And not because we just hired women, we hired the best, and I'm very proud of that. But it hasn't been easy. You know, we're running at a really fast pace. We're launching all of these cars, and it's a huge responsibility. I'm up at about, well, I was up at 4 today. It's more like 4:30 to 5 most days. Yeah, the people from Chanel had to work hard on this makeup to cover up the bags. But what's most important really is kind of when I get to the important part of the story. How did I get here, and what do I think is important? And really, it's about finding people along the way. And I have to say, and I mentioned this, Richard, I was blown away when I looked around this room. I've given a few speeches at women's summits and conferences. I've never seen so many men in the audience. And I want to thank all of you for being here, because you're here supporting all of us. So thank you for that. Because surrounding yourself with the right people is what propels all of us, not only to do better things in life and be better at our careers, but that's what propels me, I think, to be a better person. And one of my best friends is here today, who I met when I moved here, and her support. And you know, you can't do this on your own. And I spent so much of my career thinking you could do it alone. You know, I work in a business where women would look at other women and think that they looked good if someone else looked bad because we didn't think there was room for more than one of us at the top. Our job as women is to take care of one another and to lift one another up. I promise there's room for all of us. There really is. And I really encourage everyone to have mentors. At any stage of your life, at any age of your life, look for people outside of your workplace from different industries. One of my mentors now she is the first female president of the University of Louisville. Her name is Dr. Neeli Bendapudi. She is a total badass. And I use her when I can't figure out how to approach certain things. So I beg you, when you leave here today, please get the business card of 2 people that you didn't know. My connection to Chanel, I met this woman on a plane, and she looked so good, and I looked so bad, and I was like, oh my God, you look amazing. And now she had a member of her team come do my makeup for me today. But you never know who you're gonna meet and at what moment in time. So for all of the men and women, I beg you to find the right people. When you're hiring, hire the right people. You have to dream big. I never dreamed in a million years that I would be standing here on this stage talking about my career and all of the bumps along the way. There's no smooth path. If you don't know what the next step is, that's okay. That's why you have your mentors. Surround yourself with people that are gonna look out for you and really take care of one another. So in closing, there's Marie. Sometimes, do you ever bring her to your speeches? I brought her to Detroit. She rushed the stage, and it was a bit of a shit show. So no, we did not bring Marie to everything. And with the potty training thing, she can't leave the house. Yeah, I run a company during the day, and I negotiate with a 2-year-old in the evenings when I'm not on airplanes. But in closing, what in the world do I have to do with Bill Gates? If you don't have a mentor, I will be your mentor. You've got to find people, and this is where I'm going to tell you how you can get in touch with me. I'm a LinkedIn influencer. Bill Gates is one as well, so that's basically the only thing we have in common. Although I got a Chapard necklace on right now, and he probably doesn't. So, but please find me on LinkedIn. From every talk I've given, I've started mentoring lots of people at all moments in their career. Please don't feel lost. We're all out here for one another. I get to represent the coolest brand on the planet. I have to also say to the team at Newport Beach, so the people that win today, and I've been reading about all of you, I'm so impressed by the people in this room and the nominees. The people that win will be getting an Aston Martin, not forever, but for 2 days. So you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car. So 5 of you get in a car for a weekend. But let's take care of one another. Let's take care of this beautiful community that we get to be part of. And for the Orange County Business Journal, since I moved back to Orange County, they have literally asked nothing of Aston Martin and from me other than friendship and partnership. And so to Bobby and Richard and to the entire team of the Orange County Business Journal, I read it every day. Thank you. Thank you for putting an event like this on. You can find me, Laura at Aston. I will be posting pictures of me, this necklace, that car, my security guard, all afternoon. Thank you for having me, and have a really wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.